it's almost like this weird multi-generational trauma. It just like keeps on getting passed on. Like, well, I had to go through this adversity, so I'm going to make it hard for you. And that being said, it's not all attendings are bullies, right? But some residents can be bullies to their subordinates. I think we have to kind of acknowledge that some adversity is good, right? Some adversity we both have faced as residents. Like, it helps you grow. It helps you become a higher skilled physician.
Absolutely.
Better confidence at the end of the day. I think where we have to advocate to draw the line is when it becomes unprofessional conduct. Interpersonal skills that would not be accepted in other workplaces, talking down to one another or calling each other's, really kind of vulgar names or something like that. Unfortunately, I have experienced, stuff like that. It's not cool. Have you?
Yes, I have. I mean, the statistic is that 80% of medical students by the end of their 4 years experience it. I've experienced it as a student. I've also experienced it as a resident. Actually, the time as a resident, it was from another resident who was a year ahead of me running the service I was rotating on, and I just had a terrible time. Logan, I think just being in that kind of environment, just knowing what you're walking into day in, day out, it does a lot for your morale. I mean, my morale was down in the gutters.
Right.
I did not feel good about going to the service in the morning. And, I hate to say, but there was even a few days where I just called out sick. I mean, I wasn't sick. I was just like...
I would say you were mentally healthless.
Yeah, I was terrified. I was so terrified of going. I remember there was one night I literally could not sleep.
Wow.
And at like 3 a.m., I just sent an email and said, hey, I'm not feeling well. I can't come in.
Mm-hmm.
But me feeling not well was just me staying up till 3 in the morning, just dreading having to go see this individual the next day.
Wow.
And I was just powerful. Like, man, I just can't do it. I just hate being around you. I hate everything about you. Just leave me the hell alone. I'm ready to move on. I don't care if I get a bad grade on this rotation.
Right.
I just want it to be over and like never have to deal with you again. Fortunately, that was an exception. Most of the residents I've worked with are,
right.
Yeah, they've been pleasant. They're lovely people. But yeah, there's been times where, it seems like that person is going through a really tough time.
Yeah.
They're hating their own situation, possibly because of how grueling residency can be.
Right.
So I hate to fault an individual. I'm just going to chalk it up to the system that they're in. Everybody's frustrated. Everybody's in this pressure cooker. And, there's certain stretches where you just crack, and sometimes that spills over to your team members, and it can cause a very unpleasant team environment. And what I worry, at the end of the day, is that kind of culture can lead to harmful outcomes for patients we take care of.
Right. Right. It sounds like you're kind of trying to institute. Are you familiar with, is it Don Miguel Ruiz, The 4 Tenets of Life or The 4 Principles of Life? You ever heard that?
Nope.
We'll do a whole podcast on that book. I love that book. But one of the ones is, don't take anything personal. Like you were saying, it's like, that if you are being in that situation, it probably has nothing to do with you. That person maybe does have a lot going on in their life that you don't potentially even know about. But that being said, I also think you shouldn't just take it. We need to try to create this kind of environment that can change medicine culture. And so I do think, I've faced similar situations where I've thought a person is being highly unprofessional in nature. And I think it's also extremely important that if you are in those situations, that you do have the bravery, is that the word I want to use? Or the ability to stick up for yourself. Because I think that if you find yourself in that situation, realize that someone in the future, someone ahead of you, likely could be in a very similar situation, if not even worse. And so if you don't stick up for yourself, you're not protecting that next person in line. And isn't that what we're here essentially as physicians to do, to try to, improve the world, heal others around us? So I think it's important to be willing to take that step and be a whistleblower, right? I like to think that these administrators, as much as we make jokes about how, their job is kind of maybe not always needed, right? Or whatever. But, I think administrators at the end of the day are good in nature too, right? Like, they want to hear about the ways that the system is not working in an optimal fashion. And the best way to institute change is by being willing to be one of those whistleblowers. And I think if you are a whistleblower, also realizing that when you do file a complaint, maybe sleeping on that email before you write it when you're really all hot and emotional. When I was in this particular situation, I remember I took an entire weekend, to formulate how I was going to compose writing this complaint, because I wanted to sound professional in nature. And I think that's kind of the key word there. It's that if you're going to combat unprofessional conduct, you need to hold yourself to that much more professionalism. Like, two people in a shouting match are both going to look like complete idiots. But I think remaining calm, professional, stating the facts of the situation and saying, hey, this person made me feel this type of way because of their, in my opinion, unprofessional conduct, and I think that this needs to be mitigated against. Thankfully in my situation, I was able to get a positive outcome that did yield to some change, something that I'm really excited about. But why I really wanted to sit down and have this conversation with you today is really to try to inspire people who are in situations like we were in to try to stand up for themselves, but in a professional manner.
I think bravery is the correct term there, possibly even courage. Because it is a fact that in medicine, there's a very hierarchical culture, right? You are a resident. You are, there's the med student at the bottom. There's the resident, the first year resident above that, second year, third year, fourth year, so on and so forth. And then there's that attending who, like, sometimes they seem like gods to you, how powerful they are and how much control they have over your professional career. Right. And there can be this element of fear of speaking up and standing up against somebody that's, that's already an independent practicing physician. So yes, I think courage is the appropriate word, because it does take a lot of courage to say, like, hey, this person is in a position of authority over me, yet because I care about the people coming after me, I'm going to take this step and try to make a change, because you didn't have to do that, because our time on the rotations are limited. I mean, I've certainly had rotations where I thought something was wrong, but I mean, maybe it was the wrong approach, but I just kind of put my head down, like many of us do. I just put my head down, did my work, grinded. If I got yelled at, I was just like, whatever, brush it off. This person's just cranky all the time, and that's nothing to do with me. And I'm just going to move on, be done with the rotation, move on, and not think about it anymore. So I think many of us go through rotations where we should say something, but because either how busy we are, or maybe we just don't want to deal with the extra burden of having to go through filing a formal complaint. Right. Because that process can be daunting as well. And during the course of a tough rotation, like, honestly, all you're thinking about is just, hey, what day is it? How many days do I have left? Yeah, let me cross another day off the calendar and keep it moving.